In our lectures on biology, we've been learning a lot about blood. And blood is a very important part of getting certain types of matter into our body, like oxygen. It's also important for getting rid of waste. And bringing in matter and getting rid of waste are two of the 8 hurdles and obstacles that need to be overcome by life in order for life to stay alive. So today we're going to look especially at getting rid of waste and how the blood does that. There are actually specialized proteins that help with each type of waste. It's kind of like a recycling plant where there are certain bins for certain kinds of recyclable materials. The cans over here, the certain kinds of plastic bottles, other kinds of plastic bottles. Everything needs to be separated by type inside the cell too, not just because it needs to be regenerated and reused. Some of it is reused and recycled, but also because to bind things effectively, a certain kind of protein machine is necessary. A good example of what we've already learned about is how hemoglobin can bind very tightly to oxygen and yet can release it at the right time. Other proteins are in charge of other things. CO2 is a waste from the glucose burning process, and only 10% of what we need to get out of our body would dissolve in the blood. CO2 does dissolve in liquid substances, just like it dissolves in the sugary water of soda, but not enough. So the rest has to be carried away by a special protein, and it turns out that hemoglobin does double duty. It carries CO2 out in a different form, in a slightly modified acidic form, and it takes it out to the lungs. So anything that needs to leave the body as waste has to have some sort of binding protein or a protein that regulates the amount of waste that's in the blood or in the body. Sometimes if waste is large, some molecular waste, it can be broken into smaller pieces, some of which then can be recycled by the body. Now, an activity to think about is the process of getting some form of kidney dialysis. Now, you may not know anybody who's on kidney dialysis, but it's a very difficult process. And dialysis works by having a person's blood go through a machine to clean out the waste. Normally, that happens in our kidneys. So this dialysis unit is sort of a substitute for our kidneys. And some people think that it shouldn't even be part of our medical system because it's so hard and it keeps people in such bad state of health. But at least it keeps them alive. And you should think about what exactly does it need to do and how worth is it to the person who needs it. So that's an activity you can think about. And a story that goes along with this idea of waste is the idea of osmosis. So we talk about osmosis. Some people know that it has something to do with water going across barriers because they drink reverse osmosis water that's been purified by reverse osmosis. What is osmosis? Osmosis is the idea that pure water is an uphill state. When we learned about thermodynamics, we learned that the G, the Gibbs free energy, tells us whether something will go naturally or not naturally, whether something is going to happen or not going to happen. For water that is filled with salt to become water that is pure is an uphill process, a positive, above zero G. So that's not going to happen naturally. Instead, what's going to happen naturally is pure water is going to want to mix in with water that already has solutes and salt and things dissolved in it. So since pure water wants to go into something that has salt in it, you can actually use that to generate energy or to do something that would normally be uphill. For example, you could inflate a balloon, which normally requires energy, just by filling the balloon with salty water and putting it into fresh, pure water and allowing the balloon to let the water in but not the salt out. That's the key. Osmosis works when there's a semi-permeable barrier. So if the salt can't go across the wall of a balloon, but the water can come in, then that's what's going to happen. The water is going to try to dilute the salty solution and is going to inflate the balloon. Life uses this force to maintain homeostasis, which is, again, the process of keeping all of the systems of life stable. And to understand osmosis, to understand diffusion, is key to understanding the rest of the processes that happen. So this is a key factor in biology, even though it is part of chemistry. Now, if you're going a little deeper, you should read about how organisms regulate body fluids and wastes. And the leaf in particular that's good is how nutrients and wastes are exchanged between blood and tissues. And these leaves and branches focus on the kidney, which is an important part of getting rid of wastes, and draw on your previous knowledge of how osmosis and diffusion work.